Okay, very good. I'll talk to them.
Where the basketball court was, and that's where gym took place on good days. So I hope we look beyond the building per se and look at what a full education is. I'm sure we will. I'm just hoping we do that. I think the comments by all the counselors are right on target, and it truly makes what you're proposing, both the school department and the manager's office, very exciting, and we all look very forward to this. And a year's time to do this study right is about, got to be pretty darn close given the number of schools. So I think the timing is right as well. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilor McGovern.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't want to take too much time on this, but I do agree with my colleagues, particularly around the early childhood piece. And I want to thank the Vice Mayor for talking about FMA and Kalo. My twins went to Kalo, you know, and we talked a lot, and I heard from a lot of parents there and from staff and the principal that, you know, issues with the condition of the building, one of which being that even, and to come to the Vice Mayor's point around the, not just about the financial inequities, but the cafeteria there has no soundproofing, and there were a lot of kids there that they would have to eat with headphones on and things like that because of the sensory issues, and it was really, you know, it was really hard for a lot of kids. So I really appreciate that this is all being looked at, and you know, certainly, you know, support whatever we have to do to, you know, to renovate our buildings. And think about, you know, as Councilor Carlin pointed out, I mean, there are some buildings where we're going to be able to expand more because the footprint is larger, such as we're doing it at Tobin. And then there are other buildings that are obviously landlocked, and that's going to make that a little bit more difficult. So I'm excited about this. Thank you for doing it. And let's, you know, while we're doing this study, and it's going to take some time to do it and get this worked out, I would assume we're going to continue to do the ongoing renovations and other projects that we need to do. We're not going to put things on hold for a couple of years while we try to figure things out. So I want to make sure that that stuff stays, you know, stays on our docket as well. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I think that
derive benefits for approximately 20 years, but also build up additional funds from the credits that we are owed. So it's sort of an expanding pie over time.
Councilor Zonovan.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. So, and who do we sell those net metering credits to?
So they can be sold on the market. It's usually not hard to find an off-taker. Like we have ourselves, for example, bought net metering credits to lower our utility bills.
Councilor Zonovan.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands up on this matter, so we can do a roll call on adopting the order.
On that motion, Councilor Carlone.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Councilor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Simmons.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler.
Okay, well,
Yes. Councilor Toomey. Yes. Councilor Zondervan.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against.
We now move on to City Manager Agenda Item Number 8, a communication transmitted from Louis A. DePasquale, City Manager, relative to a waiting report Item Number 20-37 regarding renaming the Central Square Library. Councilor Simmons, you have the floor. Councilor Simmons? Counselor Simmons, are you there?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is on City Manager's Agenda number 8.
Yes.
I want to thank sorry, I'm having, my audio is not the best. I want to thank the City Manager for bringing this particular item forward about the Pearl Street Library. Well, a couple of things that I wanted to just say briefly. When we think about the libraries in Cambridge, and my research may not be absolutely accurate, but this is what I believe. I think we have 7 branch libraries, 7 libraries, the branch, and 6 others. I believe at this time they may all be named after men, but I'm not absolutely sure. I don't think any of them are named for people of color, which was part of the reason why I brought in the policy order that asked for this. So although I'm happy that we're going to study this, I'm just hoping that it's not going to take us so long that we don't get any a response in a reasonable time. In terms of the Pearl Street Library in particular, the Pearl Street Library does have the Lewis Meeting Room, which is named after the first African American, perhaps the only African American that's been in an executive position in the Cambridge Public Library system. He was the assistant librarian, I think, for the main branch. And we have a room to that testifies to that, and that's very good, and I'm very proud of that. We also have the acknowledgement of Leroy Cradwell. Leroy Cradwell, who is many thousands gone, served on the Council on Aging Board. He may have sat on a few city managers advisory boards. He was one of the Cambridge senior advisors. I did a lot of work for the city of Cambridge in terms of community activism and participating on boards and commissions, and they acknowledged him at the Central Square Branch Library just before he died. And then, of course, there's the Black History Collection. So I think it's important that we acknowledge, we just came off of, and we're still celebrating Juneteenth, and we're lifting up in many of our conversations about the Black and Brown community. I think just this evening, I've heard the Black and Brown community mentioned by several city councils, all for good reasons and all important. So it seems to me equally important that we have within our midst a library that speaks to education and varied other things named in and for someone like Mariah Baldwin and Congressman Lewis, who I loved his favorite statement about getting into good trouble. So I hope that my point for bringing this forward is I'm just concerned that this just doesn't get so bogged down, that it doesn't happen, because I know we're also looking at, I think it's furtherly devoted for, or what vote for, the whole needs assessment, and we know that's going to take 2 years. And then lastly, in terms of the neighborhoods that were listed that were going to be participating, it had the Port, it had Cambridgeport, but didn't list Riverside. And as most of us that have studied a little bit about the Black community in Cambridge, Riverside was one of the larger Black communities, along with the Port, and with Cambridge, the Port, meaning what formerly called Area 4, Cambridgeport, a very strong component of North Cambridge, and then of course Riverside, which still has a significant African American community there. You do list in the ask in terms of representation. You mentioned the Family Policy Council, which I'm assuming means the Youth Council, but maybe it doesn't, because that's important to me that we channel youth voices. So I added to the list representatives from, say, MBK or a like organization, or the Gold Program, or a like program, so we have the youth voices, because while we want to hear their opinion, but we also want to encourage participation as we look at boards and commissions and always having such a hard time trying to fill slots. You know, every opportunity we give to young people to participate is an opportunity to grow their interest in and appreciation in participating. So it's just important that those two things I wanted to just say. One, I'm asking for this, and I thank my colleagues who supported the underlying order, because I think it's important to acknowledge these two people. And for anyone that might say, well, you know, Mariah Baldwin, where we've named a school and now they're talking about changing the name of the community, I would then say my response would be, people like Tip O'Neill have a library, a golf course, and Tip O'Neill did incredible work. And that's only to say that we have buildings and places named after the same individuals. And the last person that I will lift up is, you think of, we have Washington Elms, we have Washington Street, we have Washington Ave, and this man owned slaves. So if we can have 4, 5, 6 buildings, streets, and other facilities named after a slave owner, we could certainly have it named this building, perhaps with if the library sees its way on this, named after Mariah Baldwin, because she's done extraordinary work. And if it should be the case that the library finds fit not to do this, I will not stop seeking a place or institution that would be willing to do this. Madam Mayor, I yield the floor.
We will go to Councilor Sabrina Wheeler and then Councilor Zondervan.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. It's glad to see this response on the agenda. I was glad to co-sponsor the original order. Happy to see it moving forward. I just had one quick follow-up question, and that was on the legal opinion that was part of this. I was just curious about it because in our policy order, the council hadn't requested a legal opinion. I think it's totally fine for it to be a part of it, but was just curious. Since I didn't assume this needed a legal opinion at the beginning, if the library board had requested a legal opinion, or just what the impetus behind that was.
True, Madam Mayor. When it comes to naming buildings, I have to be honest, I wanted to make sure whose authority it was, so I asked the city solicitor before I created a committee that I at least knew whose standings. Was it the city council? Was it the manager? Was it the library board? In the past, there's been some confusion, so it was me just trying to say, if we're going to move forward with this, let's get it out front on exactly what the structure is. So that's why I did it, to be honest.
Thank you, that's helpful. I'll yield back.
Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I certainly support this effort to rename the library and to create an African American Cultural Center. I'm curious about the programming and if we've thought more about that, because there's a lot of talk in the community about a museum or a cultural center or some place where African American and Black culture can be housed and celebrated in the city. And whether it's in this building or another building, is there thoughts of what that might look like in terms of programming and, you know, the space that could be utilized for that? I know a few years ago there was an effort to have a steel band, and, you know, there were challenges with both storing the equipment and having space to perform the music. So what are we thinking about when we think about setting up a cultural center in the library or somewhere else?
Councilor Zondervan, I think it's a little bit beyond the scope of what's before us. I just want to move the meeting along. I'll let Dr. McCauley, I saw you trying to respond if you'd like to, but want to keep it to the actual memo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And we are, with this process, we're really looking at the renaming, and the library building program will be studied, you know, through the public process related to the discussion last week. Thanks.
Councilor Zondervan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And through you, I guess maybe just as part of this study to really think about not just the name, but also what implications it has on programming the building, because, you know, if we just name it an African American Cultural Center, but it doesn't embody that, then we haven't really accomplished the goal. Thank you.
I do not see anyone else's hands up, so we can do a roll call on placing the matter on file.
On placing the communication on file, Councilor Carlone.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Simmons?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Sabrina Wheeler?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Toomey? Yes. Counselor Zondervan?
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui?
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against.
We are on to City Manager Agenda Item Number 10, transmitting communication from Louis A. DePasquale, City Manager, relative to the appropriation of $65,019,211 received from the U.S. Department of Treasury through the new Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund established by the American Rescue Plan Act to the Grant Fund Finance Department of their ordinary maintenance account. And this was pulled by Councilor Nolan.
Thank you, Mayor Siddiqui. I just had a quick question on this. I was very glad to see the comprehensive memo from the city manager related to this very large amount of funds, the 65 million, which is related, was laid out in the memo for a range of uses. What was also noted in the memo is that the city council had asked for a meeting to discuss how it is that these funds would be deployed. And I was glad to see that at the end, the city manager indicated that he would be working with the finance committee of the city council to meet and discuss the spending. And so my question was just whether we have a sense of the timing of that meeting going forward.
True, Madam Mayor, I'm going to turn it over to David and Keel and Michelle Kincaid. Right now, I know David and Michelle are still trying to fully grasp all the ramifications, so I'm not quite sure how quickly that will be, but I know they've got some thoughts on that.
And I will say that Councilor Carlone did reach out about, I know there was a thought about a roundtable and other meetings. I think we'll have a bunch of meetings on this, which is what will happen. And I'll let David take it from here.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think you said it best. We've been in touch with the finance co-chairs, and they plan on scheduling meetings so that we can have a detailed conversation.
Councilor Nolan?
Thank you. That was my question, Mayor Siddiqui, and I'm glad to see that's in the works and very glad to see that we will have these funds available to deploy as needed across the city.
Councilor Zondervan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I look forward to that discussion as well. I have a question about the appropriation. So will the money be spent from here on out without further appropriation requests to the council, or would you still come before the council each time you're spending this particular money?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the appropriation before you is to appropriate the full amount that we are estimated to receive. We have received a portion of the funds already. And again, there are listed in the memo several items that we're still reviewing and digesting and making sure that they meet the compliance and reporting guidance that has recently been issued by the Department of the Treasury. There are some things that, for example, additional testing has a cost that clearly we have some bills and that we would charge against this. And as I said, drill down with the department heads and come up with detailed plans that, again, adhere to the compliance and the reporting, and to make sure that whatever we spend is within the guidelines. Yes, the answer is the money would be available, but again, I think that we are in the beginning stages of exploring how we would spend this money, and clearly the managers indicated that the co-chairs of the Finance Committee will schedule meetings to get input from the council so that we could also listen to some of the ideas that you have and see how they fit within our ability to spend these funds.
True, Madam Mayor. I think David said it best. This is an unusual situation. We have $65 million. We needed to appropriate it for some accounting reasons, but we know the council has some real issues and concerns on where this money's spent, and rightfully so. So once we get to those finance committee meetings, we can come up with a system on how we're going to report, how we're going to discuss. But this is in no way, shape, or form a process that we look at as once we appropriate it, we're just going to spend money. This is an important, we want the council involvement in. And we can talk about that at Finance Committee, just how that's all going to work.
Councilor Zondervan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I certainly understand that, but it does feel strange to me because it's more akin to free cash, right? Where you would come to us and say, we need $2 million for this and $3 million for that. but now it seems like we're being asked to vote on $65 million to be spent without any real, control or discussion about how it's going to be spent.
Well, what we tried to do is put as much specifics in the letter as we could to give you some ideas where we're going, and that's why we've committed, as the council asked, to go to the Finance Committee. But you are right, in terms of this $65 million, the authorization, once the appropriation comes, is the city's authorization. But in order to accept the money and start moving forward, this is the way we felt we had to do it. It's an unusual situation. But again, I assure you that we plan on working very closely with the finance chairs and the council to make sure that we're all on the same page, or at least aware of what we're all doing together.
Councilor Donovan?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. So, but is there no other way to do this? Like, could you treat it more like free cash or have some other way to do the individual appropriations?
And sorry, let me jump in here. I think I see where Councilor Donovan is coming from. On the school side with the ESSER funds, for ESSER 1 and 2, the finance, Claire Spinner and others, they've used our committee priorities and budget priorities to set up a plan. ESSER 3, it has a timing to it, and the school committee will be talking about ESSER 3 because it is over a certain period. So I guess to maybe Michelle and David around how I guess the process here for American Rescue Act is a little bit different, that would be helpful.
Well, I think I'll let Michelle comment, but again, just to remind everyone that we have to 2024 to incur the expenses, and we have to 2026 to spend the funds. So this isn't going out the door next week. So this is going to be, again, there is a reporting and project planning process that we're going to have to follow to make sure that, as we mentioned in the letter, when we do our quarterly reporting and our interim reporting, that basically the ideas that we have meet the regulations and the compliance of this grant. So again, I think, as the manager mentioned, this is not going out the door in huge and fast spurts. I think we have a good game plan, and some of those things that were listed in the letter are things that clearly we've been listening to the council about some of their priority areas, and we've included them in the listing. But as I mentioned, we just got some more detailed information about how this needs to be reported and how it needs to be reconciled in terms of the regulations. So we're just beginning this process, and in order to get this funds available to spend, it needs to be appropriated. And I think that's our typical process, and it is really not a free cash type of item. It really is a grant to the city of Cambridge that the city council routinely approves. But again, knowing the amount of money that's being provided to the city and some of the priorities of the council, we clearly plan on partnering with the council to solicit their feedback and do the analysis of whether those things can or cannot be done. Because as the manager mentioned, if we don't do that due diligence process and we end up spending funds that turned out to be rejected by the feds, we'll be back to you for a appropriation to make up the difference. So we're going to be prudent and we're going to be thoughtful. So I think there's a level of timing here that is fairly long. So again, we're not spending $65 million next week, I assure you that.
I mean, it's different in a way, but it's also somewhat similar to what we've done with the COVID relief funds, where we've determined eligible expense, we've had the appropriation, and then that allowed us to charge those expenses. And we had a category expenses that we would put in. But Michelle really has to be careful in terms of what expenses are eligible, and that she's played an incredible role, because if you make an expenditure and it's determined it's not eligible, that's a real problem. So that's why we've really not gone into full specifics yet, as we want Michelle to get a full understanding of what we feel is eligible here, because like I said, if we determine something is and it isn't, then we've got a bit of a problem. But I'm going to turn it over to Michelle, who's really spent a lot of time getting into the specifics here.
Through you, Madam Mayor. This grant is a little bit different from the COVID Relief Fund grant. The COVID Relief Fund grant was based we were given the funds in a dire emergency. So we were given the funds and we were told what to spend the money on, and that's what we did. For this, we're in a recovery period. So the way they laid this federal grant out is that we have to have a plan. We need to go through, and two of the main components would be to include expenditures that are within the guidance, and the guidance hasn't even been fully decided yet because it's still out for public comment until July 16, 2021. But they have given us some reporting and compliance type information. And the difference in the reporting for the CARES grant compared to this one is that we have to report on program and performance reporting. So if we decide that we're going to use money for a certain program, we have to be able to prove that the money is actually doing its job. So if that's why it's going to take more time. It's going to take time to sit with each of the departments to go through all the different ideas that we have out there and vet them and actually come up with a program for each one of the projects. So they have to be reported by project. They have to be reported based on not only what we've spent, but also on the performance goals. So it's going to take a while, and it's similar to the ARA grant back in 2011. I know, you probably were. That was a grant that was given to boost up the economy, and that took a good 4 or 5 years to report on and spend, but we were always reporting through the portal to the federal government what we were spending and what the programs were. So it is highly regulated, and I look forward to working with all the departments and with the council on coming up with some creative expenditures.
Yeah, I think, what would have been helpful, I think the timeline piece in this of when we have to use them by, and the years, I'm glad about the explanation. And then for the public to know that, the finance committee will schedule meetings to, as it says in this, to discuss with the city council specific projects that are, funded through this, these monies.
And again, this is a grant, and it's no different than the other grants that the council appropriates, as well as the CARES fund that we recently did, as Michelle mentioned. So I think the difference here is we understand that the council would like to have input and would like to have ideas vetted, and clearly I think the manager has agreed to do that. So this really is it's sort of a little bit different, but not really. But I think the difference is that we've got $65 million that we need to spend thoughtfully and legally and in compliance with the regulations. And I think there's going to be a lot of good ideas, but we need to vet them all. So I think, again, this is a course of action of what we normally do, which is appropriate grant funds. And then in this case, the actual spending will be a collaborative effort.
So
I want to add that I think this is important. As we did with the money we received earlier, it sounded like a great deal of money, and it was. But once we put all our expenses that we've already made, that money went quickly. So this is a discussion. It's $65 million. But if you look at all the items in this email alone, it can go relatively quickly. That's why we want to have this discussion, to make sure, because we are going to have to prioritize. We're not going to be able to do everything, even though, don't get me wrong, it's a well appreciated $65 million. Based on the needs we're looking at, it could go pretty quickly.
We'll go to Councilor Zonovan once more, and then Councilor Carlone and Councilor Simmons.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I certainly appreciate the reporting and the need to make sure that we're complying with the federal government's guidelines. But I think it is very different from other grants. In particular, this is a multi-year expenditure, it sounds like. And so, again, it just feels very strange to me that we would appropriate the full amount tonight, and then, we could have a whole different council and different city manager, a year and a half, 2 years from now, making expenditures that, we didn't necessarily decide on or agree on ahead of time. So I am questioning that process a little bit, because it does feel to me, conceptually, I understand that, legally it's very different from free cash, but conceptually, it seems to me it should be treated in a similar way, where it's sitting there, but in order to spend it on anything, the council should have a vote to decide, yes, we want to spend it on this, or no, we don't. So I'm not sure what the right procedure is to have that discussion, whether we need to table this or charterize it, but I would like to have a further discussion about exactly how the mechanics of that could work, because it does feel uncomfortable to me that we would vote on spending the $65 million tonight. I get that, we're going to have conversations about it, but it doesn't sound like we would have further votes on it.
Madam Mayor, I guess just in terms of nuances here, you're not really voting to spend the money, you're voting to appropriate so the funds are available to be spent. And I think that, again, this is now, every day we have gotten guidance from the state about how we need to book this on our books. We've gotten guidance from the feds just in the last day or two. There are webinars we attend. So I do think, I appreciate what you said, but again, I think the manager's made a commitment that once this is appropriated and on the books, how it gets spent and on what topics will be a conversation with the council. And I think Councilor Carlone may have some more things to add with that, as well as Councilor Simmons, the co-chairs of the Finance Committee.
And I would jump in and just say, I certainly can understand the questions. We had them when we had the discussion, because this is a little unusual. But based on, the advice of David and Michelle and the financial, how this all was going to work, they really felt that this was the best way to go. And that's one of the reasons why we specifically wanted to put in the Finance Committee and working with the council. Because you're right, we are doing this a little differently, but based on the guidelines we're getting, this is the way it seems like it has to work. But I certainly can appreciate the questions.
So I'm going to go to Councilor Carlone, Councilor Simmons, and then Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure my co-chair will have some good comments as well. We did talk to staff today about this process, and we raised similar questions, but I think Mr. Gale's last comment that this is not 65 million that the staff can do whatever they want with it. We will be discussing all this in great detail. I think it would be helpful, Mr. Manager, if on a monthly basis, if not more frequently, that as you learn, as you, David and Michelle learn about what can be funded, what can't be funded, the actual process, if we could have updates, even if we're not having a finance meeting that month. So it might indicate that we should have a finance committee meeting. I think that would be very helpful, so that we're always in the loop as far as what you've learned and what we have to focus on, restrict where we spend funds, what is eligible, what isn't. I think we each have ideas that are somewhat COVID related that aren't on your list so far, that underserved neighborhoods in particular could certainly utilize. So I would imagine that you would agree to update us as you learn along the way with a simple memo.
Through you, Madam, I think that's a great suggestion, because we're learning this as well. So as we learn things, we certainly want the council to know what we know about this, and we'd be happy, I think, to send emails and thoughts, and then once we feel like we've reached the point where we need to have another finance committee meeting to discuss it in more detail, we'd be happy to work with the chairs to say this would be the appropriate time. And if the chairs think it needs to be earlier, we'll be happy to have the discussion and do it earlier.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm done.
Councillor Simmons and then Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and to my co-chair for making those points, because he hit on most of the points that I was going to make. The only thing I wanted to add is, as we have these meetings, particularly as the Finance Committee, we'll try to make every opportunity to have them in the evening so it's public facing, because there's a little misinformation around this in the community. We'll try to make as many opportunities, and I don't want to speak without totally engaging my colleague about time and when and how to have these public-facing conversations so that people will understand that this is $65 million that in so many ways may be already spoken for, because, as you're saying, Mr. City Manager, through you to your finance staff, is that there's money that we have spent well, but would be important to replenish just for the sake of our bond rating and a number of other things and other expenses that are coming down the road that now, with this ability to replenish, if you will make the ability to have those projects and programs go forward. So I don't want anyone to think that the council will be looking at it. I don't want anyone thinking this is money, $5 million, that you just go out and spend, and it's a wish list, and let's put whatever you want on the table and ask for it, number one. Number two, I don't want anyone to leave this room or report out that we would not have some sort of public-facing process through either the Finance Committee or some other form, and I will talk to my co-chair about that, who's always very willing and able to make sure the public is engaged. And then lastly, it's extraordinarily important through these processes that we inform the community of, to use your words, Mr. Kale, that we have to be thoughtful about how the money is spent, that it has to be legal how the money is spent, and it has to be in compliance. And that's going to be important because people don't always get those subtle nuances. So I look forward to taking this on, working with my co-chair on this. I'm glad that this is coming our way. It's an important process that's coming before us. So I will yield the floor. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Vice Mayor Mallon. That was me. Sorry. Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I was actually really excited about the list of things that are being contemplated here in the memo from the city manager and his staff. But I do hear some of the concerns by my colleague that I think we need to have an initial conversation with the council and the manager's office sooner rather than later, because I do think there's a lot of anxiety around this money, how it has already been spent and what we will be spending it on. I think Ms. Kincaid said it earlier. I think some of this money is already gone. So I think it would be helpful for us to even have initial conversation about saying it's not $65 million, it's $40 million, right? Just having a baseline conversation, maybe in the next couple of weeks, before we really just to have a quick conversation with the Finance Committee and just really decide on those broad strokes of where the council wants to be directing some of that effort and energy. I mean, we've been talking in this council so much about equity and racial justice and broadband, right, over the last 16 months. I think it would be really good just to have that initial broad-based conversation with the manager's office and with the council.
I just don't want to promise in 2 weeks. I want to make sure that they're ready to have this conversation, but trust me, as soon as we're ready, as soon as possible, we will work and set it up. And it won't be too long, but I just think like I said, I'd rather have them feel comfortable that we can have a good discussion. But
through you, Madam Mayor, to Vice Mayor. So at this point, we haven't committed anything. The only thing I would say, honestly, is we probably going to have some testing bills that we know are clearly okay. And if we can't use our CARES fund, this may be a funding, but it will be a small amount of dollars. So right now we haven't committed or spent anything. There may be some invoices for things that are clearly within the confines of the grant, that's no questions, but those are small dollars, and only if we can't use our CARES funding to do that. So I think we're starting from the position of these are things that the staff has thought of, and again, in some cases with some council priorities in mind. So I think that's why we list them. They need to be fleshed out. And as Michelle said, we've gotten our guidance. So now we can really, once we digest the several pages of guidance on top of the 150 pages of guidance, once Michelle digests it, we can say, okay, clearly this idea, we can report, we can justify, we can demonstrates compliance so that when we do submit an expenditure report, that it won't be rejected. So, but again, I think clearly, as Councilor Carlo and Councilor Simmons said, clearly, getting ideas from the council, because again, this wasn't meant to be the only things we're going to consider. We clearly know that you have ideas and that we want to hear from them, so we can get those ideas vetted in a way that we can have an answer, yes or no, and that we can take the time to do it. So again, as I said, this isn't spending the money, this is just getting the money on the books so that we can receive the revenues, and then basically it's available to be spent once ideas are vetted and are ready to go.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I don't have an issue with the way that it is being presented to us tonight in terms of appropriating the funding. I think what you just said, Mr. Kale, that there's some small dollars in testing, that if it isn't paid for by CARES Act money, that's the bulk of what we're talking about here. The council and the residents don't know that we're not talking about $20 million, right? And so this is why I'm saying, even if it's a preliminary conversation, just to get some of these facts out into the community and to us, I think that would be very, very helpful. Like I said, I'm really excited about so many of the things on this list. I think that speaks to a lot of our council priorities, but I think that we, as some of the other councilors have mentioned, we really should have a broad strokes conversation and make sure we aren't leaving out something really, really critically important. So I also know that in a week and a half, it becomes summertime and it becomes very difficult to pull together a meeting, and maybe with Zoom it might be easier, but I do think people are going to want to spend some time with their family this summer, so getting something on the books sooner rather than later would be preferable. So thank you, Madam Mayor. I yield back.
We'll go to Councilor Toomey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just looking at the memo that the city manager sent to us in terms of this appropriation that we're going to be receiving from the federal government of about $61 million, which is really fantastic. That we're going to be receiving this, and I know some people would want us to spend this almost immediately, but there is criteria that has to be followed, and this is going to be a very daunting task. So as it's laid out in the memo, there are the list of the potential eligible projects that could be explored. In the counting that I here looked at this as 29 potential eligible projects, but that's not limited to those 29 projects. The categories: public health funding, free public transportation access, upgrade our neighborhood parks and playgrounds, the economic impacts of the public health emergency, job training, other employment services for individuals, grants for the tourism, outdoor dining, storefronts, public patios, grants to our Cambridge nonprofit organizations, expansion of food delivery to our residents, rent, mortgage support to our residents. The other category is water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. But certainly, the port infrastructure project, the broadband pilot program that we'll be talking about, digital equity. So that here in front of us right now is around 30 potential eligible projects. And each one of these that are on this list has their own constituency that are going to be very, very active in advocating for their project. So this is going to be a daunting task for the council and the city administration. The finance committee, I believe, those two co-chairs have done a great job, and they've got the work cut on this. We have a very active constituency, the public, and they're gonna be looking to, all these things that I've laid out here. $61 million might seem a lot, but if you even give just the 29 that are listed, never mind the other eligible projects that will come before us from another different constituency. It's gonna be a challenge for all of us. So I think we do have to, as the city manager and I think the co-chairs of the finance committee have said, we have to, tread slowly and carefully as we proceed on this. Because every one of these 29 in front of me, I would fund it immediately tomorrow. So like I said, to the co-chairs of the finance committee, and I anticipate a lot of finance committee meetings over the next couple of months. But clearly, our residents need a lot of this funding that's coming in, and we have to provide this in a timely manner, but also in a very well thought out way make sure that we are complying with the regulations that are probably not even properly formulated, how we and where we can spend this money. So it's looking forward to working with my colleagues in the city administration on this. So, you look at every one of these eligible projects, and they're all incredible things that we should be doing. Early child care, pre-K programs.
Thanks, Councillor Toomey.
Yes, you got my point, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Anyone we haven't heard from on this? Councillor Zonovan, I see your hand up, but we have to move along. So if there's a quick question, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've heard the comments and I appreciate discussion, but I feel like, maybe I didn't get my point across that discussion is fine, but that doesn't give us a vote on how this money is spent. That vote apparently is happening tonight. So I'm going to exercise my charter right and have a further discussion about how we can make sure that we have a vote on how this money gets spent.
Councillor Zonovan has exercised his charter right, so we will move to the calendar. Councillor Sabrina Wheeler.
Number 4.
We'll pull number 4, the live acoustic entertainment ordinance. We'll pull number 5, the amending city council rules for remote participation. And I think that is all that we can act on tonight. So, Councillor Sabrina Wheeler, you have the floor with the live acoustic entertainment ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you. And thank you to Vice Mayor Mallon for all our work on this, and Councillor Carlone and McGovern for co-sponsoring it. I'm glad this is up for ordination tonight, as they have been everywhere. Musicians and local restaurants in Cambridge have been severely impacted by the pandemic, and this ordinance is a small but important way we can support them. It would allow local businesses to have live acoustic performances without having to go through the process of obtaining a license from the city first. By enacting it, we'd be following the lead of Boston, where the city council passed a similar ordinance in 2016, and it's been successfully implemented there for 5 years. And while it does make it easier for artists and local businesses and takes out one piece of red tape, it does still have important regulations. Performances must be from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. They can have no more than 5 performers, and there's only one microphone for amplification allowed. So I'm happy to let other folks speak on this. There's one small amendment tonight, add numbering for the ordinance. If you can see on the version online or in the packet, it's spelled as a placeholder for the ordinance number. I've been in touch with the clerk about a number for the municipal code. Amendment which council should have received. So, I'm happy to go to discussion before the amendment and ordination, but then we'll make that amendment for the numbering.
Councillor Sabrina Wheeler, I don't see any hands up on this. So, do you want to move forward with your amendments and bring them forward us, clerk?
That would be great. So it looks like the amendment's on screen. It's just to add the title for the ordinance with the numbering 5.60 and then the numbering for the subsections as well.
I do not see any hands up on the amendments before us. So I think we can go ahead and do a roll call on these amendments.
On the amendments, Councilor Carlone.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon. Yes. Councilor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Simmons.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Toomey. Yes. Councilor Zondervan.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against.
Committee Wheeler?
On ordination, Councilor Carlone.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon. Yes. Councilor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Simmons. Yes. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Toomey. Yes. Councilor Zondervan.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against.
We will now move on to unfinished business item number 5, amending city council rules for remote participation. These were adopted in the last meeting, and we can adopt them here pursuant to Rule 36B. On a motion to adopt, seeing no other hands up. Councilor Nolan, you have a question?
No, just move to adopt.
Oh, great. So on a motion to adopt, we will do a roll call.
On that motion, Councilor Carlone.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon. Yes. Councilor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Simmons.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Toomey. Yes. Councilor Zondervan.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against.
We now move on to applications and petitions. An application, pleasure of the committee. Is there a motion?
Move to place on file.
So there's a motion to adopt the order application before us, so we'll do a roll call.
On adoption of the application, Councilor Carlone.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon. Yes. Councilor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Simmons.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Toomey. Yes. Councilor Zondervan.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against.
We're on to communications. There are 2. Councilor Zondervan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to pull one for a brief comment.
Poll, which one? Number 1? We will do a roll call on placing communication number 2 on file.
On that motion, Councilor Carlone.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Simmons.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Toomey. Yes. Councilor Zondervan.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against.
We're on to communication number 1, a communication received from Omar Smith regarding an incident report on August 23rd, 2020. Councilor Zondervan?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, this does seem to be a little bit unusual of a communication. This is a member of the unhoused community who is reporting an incident that they had reported to the police about an alleged property theft. And it has a handwritten note, but that was not readable. I don't know if that was part of the original, that it wasn't unreadable, or if it got lost in the printing.
Through you, Mayor Siddiqui, to Councilor Zondervan. I personally received the document from Mr. Smith and transmitted to the City Council as received.
So the handwritten note.
Councilor Zondervan?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, the handwritten note was not readable in the original.
Yeah, I did not specifically try to read the handwritten section, but it is communicated exactly as I received it.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I'll try to reach out to him and see if I can get more details from him. Thank you.
On a motion to place this on file, roll call.
On that motion, Councilor Carlone.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Simmons. Yes. Counselor Sabrina Wheeler?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Toomey? Yes. Counselor Zondervan?
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui?
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against.
We now move on to resolutions. Pleasure of the City Council. On a motion by Councilor Simmons to adopt resolutions 1 and 2, we'll do a roll call.
On that motion, Counselor Carlone? Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor McGovern?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Nolan?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Simmons? Yes. Counselor Sabrina Wheeler?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Toomey? Yes. Counselor Zondervan?
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui?
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against.
We now move on to policy orders and resolutions. Pleasure of the City Council.
Madam Mayor,
Councilor Simmons.
thank you. Policy order number 1, please.
Number 1, pleasure of the City Council. I see Councilor Toomey.
2,
2,
policy order 2.
2.
Mayor Siddiqui.
Councilor Nolan.
Number 3.
Number 3. Anyone else?
Let's see. Adopt the balance.
Actually, I'll pull number 4. I was going to be added to this one. So we'll pull all of them. We'll go to number 1, that the city manager is requested to direct the appropriate city staff to determine the feasibility of establishing a pilot reparations program that would take a to be determined percentage of revenue from local cannabis sales and distribute these monies to local black-owned businesses and to economic empowerment applicants. This was filed by Councilor Simmons and Councilor Nolan. Councilor Simmons, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I want to just acknowledge and thank my colleague for co-sponsoring this order. We've been discussing this back and forth for a while. Thought this would be a very appropriate time on the just having celebrated Juneteenth. Cambridge has chosen it as a holiday and towns, and just recently has made a federal holiday. So this was a very appropriate policy order to bring forward. I hope my council members will stand behind and support. I think it's quite self-explanatory why we're asking for the City Council to consider this. It was said earlier that community of color, Black and Brown community in particular, has been unfairly impacted by the war on drugs, particularly the war on drugs as it pertains to marijuana. That has not stopped. And so this is an opportunity to repair that damage, to acknowledge that damage, and to make a way for the Black and Brown community to kind of to heal and repair themselves and have as a community come forward. So I respectfully ask that the committee would support this order, but in addition, the young man that spoke made an extraordinary point about having this being a public-facing process. And so, if this is adopted, myself, with the city manager, Councilor Nolan, and any other colleague that wants to weigh in on this, we'll make sure that we have a process where the community is certainly engaged in the process of putting together a reparations program. Madam Chair, you.
We'll go to Councilor Nolan and then Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mayor Siddiqui. I want to thank Councilor Simmons for taking the lead on this incredibly important and necessary conversation. It is past time to be discussing reparations. I really hope that Cambridge can become a leader among the municipalities around the country that are taking local action. Just a couple of quick things. There's so much laid out in the policy order that the scale and magnitude of true reparations, we recognize, I think, can only be achieved by the federal government if we're really talking about this on a national scale. No local or even state government has the resources for full restitution for slavery and the many other injustices. However, that is no excuse for local governments not to take action. Other local governments started these conversations and even taken some action, and Cambridge acted well. And no matter what we are able to do, it will not prevent the need for federal action, but we can take a step to show what is possible and necessary. And as we heard in public comment, Cambridge has our own legacy of benefiting from slavery. Anyone who's visited the African American Museum in Washington, D.C. understands that so much of Massachusetts state, our economy just depended on the labor of enslaved people, and right through to adhering to federal policies on housing in the 1950s that literally barred Black residents from development. As outlined in the book, The Color of Law, Cambridge is specifically mentioned as one of the places in the country where this happened. So I see this policy order as a first step, and as Councilor Simmons indicated, next step, if this passes and we do get a report, will obviously include the community as well, because this will end up in a much larger and longer conversation. I really hope that we'll be able to support this as one of the leaders in this area. Thank you. I yield, Mayor Siddiqui.
We will go to Councilor Zondervan and then Vice Mayor Mallon.
Thank you, Ma'am. Through you, I certainly support reparations, and I appreciate this order coming before us. But as we heard in public comment, there are definitely some concerns, and in some ways, a commingling of reparations for slavery and restitution for the war on drugs. And of course, the need to have a real public process and a real community conversation. So I would like to hear from the Vice Mayor, but I will exercise my charter right after that to have some more discussion with the motion makers about this order. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Since Councilor Zondervan exercised his charter right, I'll yield back at this time and have a further discussion when this comes back next week.
We will move on to the next policy order. Councilor Zondervan authorizes charter item number 1. We go to policy order number 2, that the City Council go on record in favor of filing the attached home rule petition entitled an act authorizing the City of Cambridge to include a ballot question on the November 2nd, 2021 municipal ballot relative to the home rule charter. This was filed by Councilor Nolan, myself, Councilor Sabrina Wheeler, and Councilor Carlone. Councilor Toomey has pulled it. As past practice, I will go to the lead motion maker and then can go to Councilor Toomey. Councilor Nolan, you have the floor.
Policy order lays out, we've had a number of meetings on this topic. This process started more than a year ago when we started talking to the Collins Center about coming in to understand how it is that we might change our charter, which is we believe the only one in the entire Commonwealth that's not been reviewed in 80 years. The policy order lays out the meetings we had before this point and includes the memos that were sent to the council at the Collins Center. These memos, which were produced after interviewing each member of the council, built on the knowledge base of charter review and change from across Massachusetts. The research on the possibilities for charter reform and review also laid out some items that a majority of the council expressed interest in. The home rule language is based off of those memos and the recent special meeting at which the memos were discussed. These are possible amendments to our charter that are routine in many cities and towns in the country, and all of which were laid out in the 2 memos and discussed in public meetings. While in fact these changes are not major ones, they are important. Each aspect of this home rule, a regular charter review process, a city manager review process, and council confirmation of boards and commissions and appointments, is included in charters across the state. And of course, if we pass this tonight and the legislature approves, there will be extensive public process since these changes would be up to the voters and would be on the ballot. So this would be the start of that process. And just to let people know, it is important that we get this to the legislature relatively soon if we want this to be passed in correctly. And for a long time with the Collins Center on getting all of those meetings settled and the memos in place. I know you spent a lot to the other motion making. Well, thank you. I yield.
Thank you. It was a team effort. We'll go to Councilor Toomey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I exercise my charter right.
So Councilor Toomey exercises his charter right. On number 2, we'll go to number 3. Policy order that the city manager is hereby requested to work with the appropriate departments and building contractors to reconsider the current plan, which eliminates many trees, including large old growth trees that are not part of the new building footprint, and specifically do everything possible to save the 3 oak trees on the west side of the property and any other large trees on the site, filed by Councilor Nolan and Councilor Zondervan. Councilor Nolan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Siddiqui. This policy order stemmed from a recently released report on the Tobin School reconstruction project that showed just how many of the trees on the current site will be taken down during construction. We know that has to happen during construction. It's unfortunate, and yet it's something that we live with. But of the 129 existing trees on the site, 94 are slated to be removed, 73% of all the current trees. While there is a plan to plant the appropriate number of replacement trees under the tree protection ordinance, we know from our numerous recent discussions on the tree protection ordinance that replacing large old growth trees with a number of smaller new ones will not come close for decades to make up the climate resiliency, heat island, and air pollution mitigation effects of the original trees. So this policy order is concerning 3 of the largest trees on the site, the 3 biggest ones that are slated to come down, because they actually fall outside of the new building's footprint, and putting in a little extra effort to preserve them now would have massive impacts on the school in the years to come. We believe from having looked at those drawings that there may be a way to save these trees. I want to thank Doug Brown, who looked into this, who calculated that just these 3 oaks make up approximately 25% of the canopy proposed for removal. While they're only 3% of the trees, they're 25% of the canopy. This city will have to replace them with 23 new 2-inch trees elsewhere on the site, but it would take decades for any of them to provide the benefits of the old. And there's no guarantee the new trees will survive. As former Vice Mayor Jan Deborah wrote this morning, the students attending the new school, which won't open until fall of 2025, will be parents themselves before any of the new trees are large enough to provide significant shade. So without significantly altering the plans for construction, I really believe these trees can be saved, and it's important we ask for the current plan to be reconsidered to allow them to survive. We've gotten many emails from people in the neighborhood and elsewhere in the city urging us to pass this. I hope that the council will, and I really hope that the city, if so, will be able to extend. Thank you, Mayor Siddiqui. I yield.
I'm going to go to Councilor Simmons and then Councilor Carlone.
Thank you, Madam Siddiqui. Mayor Siddiqui, I want to thank my colleagues for bringing this forward. I know they're very thoughtful in and around this issue, but I'm not sure I could support this. I need a little bit more information, so I'm going to exercise my turn, right?
We will move on to policy order number 4, that the city manager is requested to work with all appropriate city departments to issue a second RFP that will work in conjunction with the current RFP to assess the feasibility of building housing above the Central Square Library, and this RFP should include information on funding possibilities filed by Councilor McGovern, Vice Mayor Mallon, Councilor Simmons, and I pulled it to ask to be added to it as I briefly talked to Councilor McGovern about this issue as well. Councilor McGovern?
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, and my apologies for not having you on the original order. It was an oversight on our part. So yes, I'm happy to have you co-sponsor. Just so folks know, I did have a conversation with, in addition to my colleagues, or our colleagues, with the city manager about this. He is in favor of the wording. He's fine with this moving forward. He's agreeable, and we would like to get this in the process and in the queue to get this moving forward so that it can happen in conjunction with the RFP for the library. As we remember from last week, the manager had said that he wanted that other RFP to go forward, but was open to a second RFP that could work, could be in tandem, but felt that it needed to be a separate discussion or a separate RFP. So that's what we're doing. Hopefully, we can get this passed tonight and get it moving. So yes, we should amend to add Mayor Siddiqui as well.
We'll go to Councilor Simmons, whose hand is up.
Thank you, Mayor Siddiqui. I was going to say yes, of course, please. We wanted to have you join this order. We know how much you support the idea of this. It's an important conversation as we look at Central Square and moving it forward. So I'm hoping my colleagues will stand with us supporting this policy order so that we can continue to look at this particular parcel of this building, all of it in total. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks. I don't see any other hands up, so on a motion to add me to the order, we'll do a roll call.
On that motion, Councilor Carlone.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Simmons.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Sabrina Wheeler.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Toomey.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Zondervan.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against.
On the order as amended?
On the order as amended, Counselor Carlone.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Simmons.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Sabrina Wheeler.
Yeah.
Yes. Counselor Toomey. Yes. Counselor Zondervan.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against.
We now move on to roundtable minutes. There are none. Next up, committee reports. Pleasure of the City Council. Since we can do a motion, if there's a motion, I'll entertain a motion to accept the report and I place it on file.
So moved.
On a
Mayor
motion.
Siddiqui?
Yes, Councilor Nolan?
Yes, thank you. I understand we're placing this report on file. This does not move forward with any language on a home rule. It just takes, because we don't have that before us, is that correct?
So what we're doing is we're going to be accepting the report and placing on file, and then within this report, well, within this, there's a motion to amend the home rule petition by substitution with the amendments recommended by the ordinance committee. There's another order as amended, and then there is another order as well. So the motion would be to accept and place on file and then adopt the orders within.
Yeah, so the, if you look at your booklets, the items are listed in order. So you accept the report and place it on file. The next motion would be that there was amended language recommended by the ordinance committee. So it would be to replace the original language submitted by Councilor Carlone with the amendments from the ordinance committee, and then to adopt that order as amended. And then there was a request to the city manager that came out of the committee meeting, and the last vote would be on adopting that policy order.
Councilor Nolan?
Thank you. So it would be adopting the policy order related to the home rule with the amendments that came out of ordinance. Thank you.
Yes. Anyone else on this? I don't see anything, so on a motion by Councilor Nolan, accept the report and place it on file, and then adopt the A, B, and C orders, we'll do a roll call.
And again, Madam Mayor, just through you, I just want to make sure, are we doing it all in one vote, or are we taking separate votes for each part? You can take them all in one vote.
I think we can just do it on a one vote. I don't see anyone pulling the items at all.
So, on that motion, again, I'll just read it for clarity of the record. This one vote will accept the report and place it on file. It will amend the home rule petition by substitution with the recommendation from the ordinance committee, and it will adopt 1C, which is a policy order that requests certain information from the city, from the law department through the city manager. On that motion, Councilor Carlone. Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Simmons. Yes. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Toomey. Yes. Councilor Zondervan.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against.
We now move on to communication and reports from other city officers. We've disposed of 3. Pleasure of the City Council, we'll pull number 1. And we can, number 2, we can place on file and do a roll call, clerk.
On that motion, Councilor Carlone.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Simmons. Yes. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Toomey. Yes. Councilor Zondervan.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against.
We'll go to communication reports from other city officers. Number 1, a communication received from Mayor Siddiqui and Councilor Simmons, transmitting information about the community process for changing the name of the Agassiz Neighborhood 8. I will yield to Councilor Simmons and thank her for her partnership on this effort. Councilor Simmons?
Siddiqui. So as you can see from the communication, it spells out the process through which Maya Counter went through in terms of joining the community around being involved in the changing of the Agassiz neighborhood to the Baldwin neighborhood. She worked with Fiobe from the Agassiz Neighborhood Council in the neighborhood. They had a process where they joined the neighborhood. She had a questionnaire, as was mentioned earlier today. And so what we're trying to do is two things. One, I think the work that this young woman, child of Cambridge, now a student at Harvard, has put into saying, this is something I think that we should be correcting. Very shortly, you're going to hear from the Monuments, Marcus Memorials Committee about looking at buildings, monuments, excuse me, that where they memorialize individuals who have participated in shameful acts. And Louis Agassiz is a person that participated in shameful acts. And so this idea that Maya came up with to change the name of the neighborhood wasn't done lightly in that context. We do no longer want to lift up the name of a person that participated in shameful acts. Again, she had, I think, at least 2 community meetings, as well as having a questionnaire that went through the entire community. The Baldwin name came up as a fitting tribute. And when we think, and I'm not going to belabor the history of Mariah Baldwin, an extraordinary woman that did not in her lifetime get the type of acknowledgement that her peers received. And so I want to thank Maya and Fiobe as well for the time that they put in doing this work to bring this before you. We could, if the council bring forward the late order that accompanies this communication, asking that we change the name from Agassiz to Baldwin. And let me just pause to give you a little background. When we changed the name of the Port neighborhood, it followed a very similar process. The Port no longer wanted to be called Area 4 because it was the name of a police district, and we did not want that kind of name associated with our community. And there was a community process, and this council, not this sitting council, but a earlier city council voted to support the work of the individuals. In fact, Renee Gray, very much like Maya Counter, was the one that stood out front with the support of then Vice Mayor Dennis Benzan and myself as both long-standing members of the court to change that name. Let's honor the hard work of this young woman. Let's honor the community process, and let's move forward and right this terrible wrong. Madam Mayor, I yield the floor to you if you'd like to continue.
So I see a hand up, and I'm just going to go to Councilor Zondervan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Really appreciate this report and the hard work that was done to have this community conversation. And I hope that we can change the name, because I think we've clearly done the community process to determine the change. So now we should just change it. So move on beyond this name. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Zondervan. Anyone else? I think the motion here for this is to place this on file, but as Councilor Simmons laid out, we've had several conversations with Maya and Huebe, and there's been, from Maya particular, the work, some of the work is laid out on this, on the different community, the different conversations on this, what some members of the community are feeling about the name change, and I think we've in the past, this council has also demonstrated our desire to do so as well. So I think we can place this on file. And Councilor Simmons, just to clarify, the late order you have is a resolution.
As well myself. I had not put the resolution policy order in writing, which was to support the community process and have the city change the city documents to say Baldwin neighborhood. So if that is not in writing, I could have that in front of us shortly, because I know we only have one more meeting before tonight. What would be your pleasure?
So I think one thing that did come up was the solicitor was going to opine, and the last half hour, what we could.
I don't see anything in my notes, Madam Mayor. Why don't we just put this on file? I will
file.
On placing the communication on file, Councilor Carlone.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Simmons. Yes. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Toomey. Yes. Councilor Zondervan.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against.
We now move on to any late resolutions.
I have no late resolutions.
Are there any late policy orders?
I have one late policy order.
We can suspend the rules to bring it forward.
On suspension of the rules to bring forward the late policy order. Councilor Carlone.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Simmons.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Toomey. Yes. Councilor Zondervan.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against. I will display the late policy order on the screen.
Madam Mayor, as you put step before us, I introduced this policy order late because it's timely. As you can read from it, the Pomeroy Foundation and the National Votes for Women Trail Committee would like to place a memorial plaque in the public way, which is the sidewalk, before the residence of Mariah Baldwin. In order for them to do that, the city council has to vote to agree to have that done. And so what this order seeks to do is to approve that. We would accept the plaque and we would place it and be responsible for its upkeep. I think it's an important opportunity. It's a national acknowledgement. It's a part of the women's suffrage centennial process that was a little bit stifled through COVID. And so they're back trying to catch up, regain ground. And so as you can see from this policy order, the ordered part is the most important. And since the city council formally go on record as being in favor of accepting a historical marker from the Pomeroy Foundation and the National Votes for Women's Trail honoring Mariah L. Baldwin to be installed at her former residence at 196 Prospect Street when the marker is received by the city, and be further that the board of the city or community hereby is requested to forward a slippery engrossed copy of this order to Freddie Kay, who is the president of the Suffrage 100 Mass, MA, on behalf of the entire city council. As again, it's very self-explanatory. I'm excited that the Pomeroy Foundation and the National Votes for Women Trail Honoring Committee has chosen Mariah Baldwin in honoring her with this national recognition. I yield, Madam Mayor.
I don't see any other hands up, so we can do a roll call on the resolution.
It's a policy. On the policy order. On adopting the policy order, Councilor Carlone.
Yes.
Yes. Vice Mayor Mallon.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor McGovern.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Simmons.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Toomey. Yes. Councilor Zondervan.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Motion passes 9 in favor, 0 against.
Any announcements from the council?
Madam Mayor?
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to highlight that the Community Arts Center is having their annual Mural Masters Festival this weekend on Saturday. Our kids to put together a mural, and there will be steel drums, video projections, portrait photos, street art, tap dance, and more from 10 to 6.
I'll be announcing some of the winners at 5. Anyone else? Counselor Nolan?
Is it the last day of school tomorrow?
The last day of
Wednesday.
school is on the 23rd.
Wednesday.
So
Okay.
almost.
That would be announced this really challenging year, and for all those who have worked on getting us to this point, including you, Mayor Siddiqui.
Yeah, we've been, I had a handful of upper school graduations last week. I went to a 5th grade moving on ceremony this morning, had the high school graduation, so it's been great seeing the students graduate, and a lot of happy families and happy kids.
I haven't missed all the counselors being there.
It's actually much smoother now. There's really no program. Anyone else? No announcements. So on a motion to adjourn by Councillor Zondervan, we'll do a roll call.
On that motion, Councilor Carlone.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Sabrina Wheeler.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Toomey. Yes. Councilor Zondervan.
Yes.
Yes. Mayor Siddiqui.
Yes.
Pass.